Hello and thanks for watching the next video of Palo Alto video training series. In this video, we're going to start setting up the system, start the network configuration, creating zones and things like that. So if you remember, this is basically the lab design that we have. We have our Windows server here. We have our Palo Alto Firewall with 3 interfaces. We have our PC with basically 2 virtual interfaces and one interface to access internet. In this video, we're going to basically start the configuration of network interfaces. Talking about what are the differences between layer 2, layer 3 zones and configuration of the zones, interface management, profiles, and basically how we can assign a set of rules for specific interfaces, zone protections, what they are, DHCP, DNS, and things like that, and a bit of routing. So let's get started. So as you can see on my VMware workstation, I have already started my Palo Alto firewall as well as my Windows server. So you can see I've got my servers up and running. Next thing we're going to do, obviously, we want to log into the interface of the firewall, to the management interface of the firewall that we have configured before, and start the configuration. So we just log in, and we're still using the default password. That's why it's going to prompt you. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to change the default password to something else, so it's not going to prompt us anytime we connect. So we go to Device, Administrators, click on the username, old password, and new one. So that's it. So we just changed the password. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to start obviously doing the interface configuration as I just said. We have two interfaces, interface 1, interface 2. Interface 1 is the inside interface of the firewall. Interface 2 is the outside interface of the firewall. And based on the diagrams, I'm just gonna go back to the diagram that we had and start obviously doing the configurations per diagram. As you can see in the firewall in the inside interface, we're supposed to set up this IP address 192.168.1.10 and on the outside interface 192.168.137.10. So let's get started. Ethernet 1/1, just click on the interface, pretty simple. So you can see there are different types of interfaces in there. HA interface, if you basically want to bundle a couple of interfaces together, and usually that's what you want to do in a typical production environment. You want to have an LACP channel or something like that, but for this particular lab environment, we don't need that. And the important ones are layer 2 and layer 3. Layer 2, obviously, if you want to work with VLANs and stuff rather than working with an interface, you could set it up as layer 2, or if you want to basically work with interfaces directly, you could set up as layer 3. The important point is, even if you work with layer 3, you still can tag the interfaces, and you could basically use it with VLANs as a trunk interface, so it doesn't really have to be a layer 2 to be able to do VLAN tagging, which I'm going to show you in a second. So we just choose layer 3, and the next thing we're going to do is set the IP address, which was 192.168.1.10/24. So that's the IP address, and that's pretty much it for now. We just click on OK, just set up the first IP address, as you can see, is untagged. Next interface is this outside interface, and the IP address that we have for outside interface is 192.168.137.10. So let's do that as well. Let's click on that. Choose layer 3 address 192.168.137.10/24 and click on OK. So now we got our interfaces, host interfaces. So just quickly show you before we go to the next step, I'll just show you what I talked about layer 3 tagging and VLAN interface. So if you have a trunk interface between your switch and the firewall, and you want to do some tagging, you see that if you select the interface, you have some basically you can add some sub interfaces, and click on that. You see that you got a tag option in there. So you could say, for example, VLAN 10 is going to have a different IP address and things like that. So that's if you require it for the purpose of this particular lab that we're doing, we don't really need that, but just so you know. Next step is, so we have assigned the IP addresses to the interfaces. The next step is to define the zones. So it's pretty simple. As per our lab, we will have 2 zones, inside and outside. So let's do that. We just define our inside zone is a layer 3, and interface 1/1 is the zone that we have. Don't worry about the inclusion, exclusion list and all this stuff. We'll talk about it later. Just let's do that. And we define outside zone and choose interface 1/2. Click on OK. So we've got our IP addresses, we've got our zones, and the next step, which is basically an important step as well, is to make sure you have basically proper routing on your firewall. By default, your firewall is not going to allow any route on the interfaces. So you need to have at least some basic routing on your firewall enabled for you to be able to talk to the firewall, to communicate, for your workstations to be able to communicate to the firewall. So we go to the virtual routes, and basically what we do there, you could just use the default one, or you could just add a new one. We just add a new one. We just call it my route. And basically all we want to do, we just want to add both interfaces that we have and define a routing. So we have other options in there that I'll talk to you about those if you have dynamic routings and stuff, but this is just to make sure that we have routing capability on the connected interfaces. Just click on OK. So we've done all these, which is good, and pretty much we already we've done our initial configuration and we're ready to test it. The next thing that I wanted to basically show you is interface management, as I said. So you could basically set up some interface management profile and allocate that to the interfaces. So basically you will have some sort of permissions on that particular interface from specific clients to do some tests and stuff. So let's do that. This is a lab environment, so I just want to make sure that everything is working okay. So I'm going to create a management profile, call it my management profile, and I'm going to permit ping, SSH, HTTP, HTTPS on this particular management profile. And permitted IP addresses, obviously I want to basically have a test, be able to test both inside and outside interface of the firewalls. So I'm going to basically specify inside network and I'm going to specify outside network as well. So typically in a production environment, you might not want to have your outside interface to have, management access to your firewall. This is again, just a test environment. So I just want to make sure that everything is working okay. And then, we could later on, remove these from the configuration if we need to. Just click on OK. So we have all these set up. The next step is basically, allocate this management profile to one of the, interfaces or most of the interfaces that we have configured before. So we just go back to our, interfaces. You see we got interface 1/1, 1/2 here. We just, click on the interface, go to the advanced, and see that we got management profile in there, drop down box, choose your management profile, click on OK again. Same thing we do it on the other interface. Go back to advanced, choose the management profile, and click on OK. So let's commit what we've done so far. And basically, if you want to preview the change, you could even preview the changes that you've done. Sorry about the pop-up blocker. So let's do that again. 10 lines. It's going to show us what is being added to the firewall, basically. So you could basically do a comparison of the old configuration and the new configuration file. Could validate the change or could commit the change. So let's do that. Just committing the change now. Give it a couple of seconds to basically commit all the changes. Configuration committed successfully. And that's pretty much it. So we've done all the initial configuration, done the interface configuration. We've got inside interface, we've got our outside interface. You could see that inside zone, outside zone, IP addresses are there. We got the zones configured. We got our basic connected routing configured as well, and got an interface management. So it's now time to test it. So I'm just going to bring up the command prompt. So if you remember, this is my own computer. I've got a virtual interface, which is 192.168.62.2 or 162.1. And I've got a another virtual interface, which is 192.168.137.1. So on that interface, we should be able to ping the outside interface of the firewall because we have allowed that. So let's give it a try. 137. And sure enough, we can ping the outside interface of the firewall. Doing another test, we go to our Windows Server machine. Going to log in. And try to ping the inside interface of the firewall from this machine, and sure enough, we can ping the inside interface of the firewall. So we pretty much have done all the initial configuration on the firewall. We got connectivity from our Windows Server to the inside interface, and we got connectivity from firewall to the external world for our basically PC, which is acting as a router now. And the other thing that I just wanted to basically show you is zone protection profile. That's an important one to know as well. So we just basically can set up a zone protection profile, which is an important thing in a production environment for DOS attacks and things like that. So if you create a profile for your zone protection, you could just call it my zone protection. That's what I call it. You could call it anything. So we could set up different protection levels, like SYN protection if there's a TCP SYN attack. So it's gonna basically alert and activate the profile and things like that based on the number of packets that it's receiving. Ping and things like that, even IP version 6. So you could set up all those, scanning and other things. If scanning happening, it could block, and protect the zone, and basically spoofing and all those kinds. So you could set up basically lots of different, security mechanisms in terms of protecting the zone, globally, and basically dedicate that to the zone. So we're just going to, as I said, we just do it for TCP scan and UDP scan. Just set up ping. We're not using ICMP version 6, so we don't need to worry about that, and UDP packets. So we just click on OK. So we've got the profile set up. Now it's time to go back to your zones. Click on the zone and basically choose your zone protection profile. And if you want to choose it for inside as well, you could do that too. And again, click on commit. And that's it. So you got your zone protection profile configured as well, which is, as I said, again, which is very important in your production environment. Otherwise, you could be under DOS attack or any other type of attack. And firewall obviously won't do anything if you don't set that up properly. The other thing that just wanted to show you is DHCP. So if you want to set up a DHCP server, basically you could do that, or you could have a DHCP relay. In our environment, we don't really have any DHCP client because we don't really have any workstation or any other device apart from our Windows server. But it is fairly straightforward to set up. So you could just specify which interface is your base for DHCP, our inside interface. What is the DHCP pool again? So you could just set up your pool in there. You could set up a whole range, or you could set up a whole subnet, or you could set up a range and things like that. So as you can see, the example is there. You could reserve some of the IP addresses and stuff if you want to. You could change the DHCP options and stuff as well. It is fairly straightforward to set up. Same thing if you don't really want to set up DHCP, and you have an internal DHCP server, all you want to do is just redirect the basically request to your internal DHCP server, to the other DHCP server that you have, and all you need to do is just set up the DHCP server IP address on here and specify on which interface it is. And all of the DHCP requests from the clients will be sent to that IP address. The other important thing is, because again, as I said, Palo Alto Firewalls are next generation firewalls, and they are, they rely on, name resolution and DNS quite heavily. So you definitely need to make sure that, you have a good DNS infrastructure, and your DNS, names can be resolved properly. In our particular case, we're using our, Active Directory, the internal DNS server, as a DNS server. So we need to set up the IP address of that as your, basically, main DNS server. As you can see, I've already done that, but just to show you, So you could basically go to devices, setup, services, and specify your DNS server primary and secondary, specify your IP addresses and things like that in there as well. If you have an NTP server, you could specify NTP server in there as well to make sure the time is synchronized between all of your servers as well. So, again, DNS is important because, your firewall relies on DNS names and it can do the application filtering and things like that. I guess, we have pretty much covered all the things that we wanted to talk about for this particular video. So I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.